guys, it's Brandy. I recently took a poll on Facebook and Twitter asking if you'd be interested in a story time with me and hearing about my paranormal activities that I've had throughout my life. And the answer was a big yes. I was going to wait until Halloween and make it a whole thing, but a lot of you really wanted to hear it much sooner, so I have a bunch of stories and I don't know where to begin, so I think I'm gonna just start in the very beginning when I was 4 years old with my first weird, creepy experience. Now, if none of you believe in this kind of stuff, that's totally fine, and I'm not here to try to change your mind or your opinions on anything. I'm just here to try to share with you my experiences and things that has happened to me as I believe it to be. I've really never told anybody about any of this before for so many reasons, but let's dive right into it. Okay, so I'm going to tell you 2 stories today. So let's begin with my very first experience when I was around 4. Whenever you're 4, you tend to forget things like this, but for some reason this has always stuck with me, and you're going to find out why. Because it freaked me to my core and continued to for years. Okay, so one night when I was around 4, I was sleeping like any other night and I started to have this awful nightmare, and I'm using my hands because I'm nervous. Okay, in my dream I was home alone in this huge house I lived in at the time with my mom and my grandparents, but no one else was around. I seemed to be completely alone and something felt very, very wrong to me. Everything looked exactly the same, except for it was very gloomy and gray, as if I was in an old black and white picture. Think of Wizard of Oz pre-color. And that's what it felt like. All the vibrancy and color had been taken out of everything. Now keep in mind, I'm 4 years old and I wasn't allowed to watch any horror movies or anything like that. And I don't know how my 4-year-old brain could dream in black and white, but here nor there. Okay, so to give you a little bit of a layout of my house and my driveway, it was a big A-frame in the back in the middle of nowhere, in the woods on 9 acres, and my driveway was about a mile long, twisty gravel road that went down the mountainside and connected with my grandmother's house. And at the bottom of my driveway, my grandmother's house was there. And we were probably about 10 miles from town. My grandmother was in her 90s at the time, and if, I needed any help or she needed to help herself physically, she wouldn't have been able to. So, getting back to my dream. So the dream felt like an alternate universe to me. I can't find anyone. Everything feels opposite. So I start running down my driveway to get to my grandmother's house to see if maybe somebody is there, because I'm literally freaking out. And so I'm knocking on her door and nothing happens. No one opens the door, and then all of a sudden the door slowly creaks open and I look inside and I swear I see the scariest dead looking half-rotting corpse woman staring at me with wild crazy white hair as I open the door. And she has the creepiest grin on her face ever, and she reaches out to grab my arm and asks me to come in. I'm 4. I run frantically down the driveway, back up my driveway, which is a mile-long road, gravel road, up the side of the mountain. And as I'm running, the whole time she's calling out to me, "Come inside, come inside." And it feels as though she can literally reach out and grab my arm, but she doesn't. It's like she's taunting me. So I finally get up top of the driveway and into my house, and I lay down. That's when I wake up, and I'm sweating, my heart's pounding, and I think that everyone can hear it because it's pounding so hard in my ears. It's thumping so loudly. Now at this point, I swear that I'm awake, because I remember looking over to my little clock that I had in my room. Even though I couldn't tell time, I looked over at it and things were back to normal as far as color, like, Technicolor had come back into play, and I could even hear my grandfather snoring, so I knew I was safe. But as I look around the room, I couldn't move or yell or speak. It was almost as if I had sleep paralysis or dream paralysis, they call it, where you're completely frozen with fear, as if something or someone is holding me down. And as I look up, I saw the dead, decaying face of that old woman staring right back at me, smiling. It was just then that I'm able to finally scream and move for help, and the lady very slowly just disappears, just like that. You guys, I have goosebumps just even talking about it. I wish that was the last time I saw the woman, but unfortunately, I kept having that dream for probably a year, give or take, and the thought and the memory just still to this day kind of sort of haunts me. So yeah, tell me what you guys think of that one. Like I said, I was only 4. This was my first experience, or not experience. I don't even know what it was. Do you think it was just an overactive imagination of a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, or do you think that it was something maybe a lot more sinister haunting my dreams? Let me know what you guys think, and if anyone has ever experienced anything like this before, I would so love to hear about it. Sippy time. Chamomile tea. Okay, so let's fast forward now about 5 years. This would make me 8 or 9. And this is a completely separate topic, by the way. No more scary corpse lady haunting my dreams, but it does start with a dream. I was having a dream one night, a very realistic dream, and I dreamt that I was riding my 4-wheeler alongside this little girl that I didn't know with medium length brown hair, much like my own, but I couldn't see her face, and I didn't know where we were at. I was on my 4-wheeler and she was on hers. I'm assuming it was hers, and we were riding along some place that seemed very familiar to me, but I couldn't quite figure out in my dream where I was at, if that makes any sense. Just then, in the dream, I heard the little girl scream, and I turned around to find her lying face down in a puddle of blood. I jerked awake, and I had goosebumps, and I was broke out in a very cold sweat, so I decided to get up, get a glass of water, and then I went back to sleep and didn't give the dream a second thought, because it's me and I have dreams all the time, and whatever, I just thought it was a dream. I went back to sleep. This was the summer after my mom passed away, and I was living with my grandparents again. They decided to have a 4th of July party that year, and my pap invited one of his co-workers and his co-worker's daughter. None of us had ever met the man before or his daughter, except for my pap, obviously. So when she arrived, on the back of her dad's truck, she had a 4-wheeler, and I thought, yes, someone I can play with, because I was an only child and I was up on that hill all by myself. And anyway, I thought we could have tons of fun riding around our land and exploring, and yay! And I didn't think of the dream at all. I really didn't. It was completely out of my mind. Now, these were kid-sized 4-wheelers. They weren't adult-sized 4-wheelers. So they were our size, and we had a couple years worth of riding experiences, so we didn't think that it would be dangerous to go riding around the property and everything. Plus, I had walkie-talkies in case we got into trouble. We traveled around our 9 acres of cleared off hills and valleys, and eventually went down the long driveway that led to my grandparents' house. And we should have stopped there, but for some reason we were feeling like rebels and continued to go down the back roads that led into town. We felt very free and alive, and once we were near the bottom of the road, there was a path that I had never rode on before or seen before, so I decided that we should open up the gate that we weren't supposed to cross and go down this path on a 4-wheeler ride. I know what you're thinking, a couple of really dumb kids getting themselves into trouble, right? And you're right. So we traveled down the path that was parallel to a creek. The path was very rocky, and our smaller 4-wheelers' wheels couldn't really go over the path very well. So we were traveling down said path for probably about 10 minutes before I suggested that we turn around and head back. Just as we were trying to get Jenny, we'll call her Jenny, Jenny's 4-wheeler turned around, it got stuck. She stepped on the gas trying to get it loose, but it was really jammed, and I tried giving her a push, but it was no use. So I started to walk back to my four-wheeler when I heard a loud scream, and I turned around and I look, and the four-wheeler was taking off across the gravel, and Jenny was flying backwards and landed head down and face down in the creek. I started to run to her as fast as I could, but by the time I got there, she was already surrounded by red water down in this creek. I thought she was dead, guys. I really thought for sure she was dead. As I turned her around, I could see a huge gash in her head, and the blood was just pouring out, guys. I freaked out and really didn't know what to do for a few seconds at least, which felt like several minutes. And I remember that I had my walkie-talkie, so I tried using it to find out that we were out of cell range. I tried waking her up, but it was no use. She was still breathing, but for how long? Because she was bleeding so profusely, and I had no choice but to go for help. So I run back to my four-wheeler and hopped on, but to my complete and utter terror, I was out of gas. How? I went downstream to Jenny's four-wheeler and hopped on it, but she had popped a tire trying to go across the gravel of the creek. At this point, I just started to bawl. I was all but frantic. Just then, a woman comes down the path and kneels down beside Jenny. A few seconds later, Jenny wakes up, and the lady, I remember her being very beautiful and angelic, and she said very calmly, "Go get help, well, I will stay with her. Go get help." So I start running down the path towards the main road, hoping that maybe a car would be traveling on it and I could get some sort of help. Or they could at least pick me up and take me to my house. And because I forgot to mention that there was like a 3-mile run up the hill just to get to my home. And it was getting dark. Knowing that if we both made it out alive, our parents might kill us for traveling this far down a gated path without permission. So I prayed the entire way home. By the time I got back to the house, it was dark and everyone was extremely worried and very upset, to say the least, and very concerned that I was arriving by myself, covered in mud and water, and I had a little bit of blood on my hands. Apparently they had searched for us, but they didn't go in the right spot, and since we were down a gated path, they didn't think that we would have traveled down that path, and I had fixed the gate to make it look like, it hadn't been tampered with. By the time we got back to Jenny, she was cold and still wet and scared, but the bleeding had stopped. I was able to gather my thoughts, and just as I did, I had remembered about the dream that I had had the night before. I asked Jenny where the woman was that had stayed and looked over her while I went and got for help. And all she could say was, "What woman? I've been here alone all by myself waiting for you to get back." Jenny went to the hospital and received many stitches and stayed overnight for observation. Later that night, as I was laying in bed, I couldn't help but remember the dream that I had had and how the details were so specific and identical to what had happened that day. The layout of the creek, the not knowing where I was but so close to home and being familiar with me. I knew for sure by the age of 9 or 10 that there was more to life than meets the eye, and that the dream that I had been a warning to not go four-wheeler riding that day, or to at least not be traveling alone down a dangerous creek on a path that we were not supposed to be on. But what confuses me even more is, who was the lady that came to help us? Where was she from, and where did she go? Why did she not at least wait until we had gotten back to make sure that she was safe? Was Jenny maybe confused by hitting her head and couldn't remember that the lady had been there? I don't know, guys. It's still a mystery to this day. Please let me know what you think had happened, if you had had anything similar happen to you, and had it all just been a crazy coincidence? I might never know, but I truly believe that it was a psychic dream and a warning to me that I could have prevented this whole entire thing, but my 9-year-old self, I didn't know that back then. But I certainly do now. And since then, I have had many, 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 many more experiences just like that. And since this video is already over 15 minutes long, I'm going to end it right here and call this part 1 of our series. And there's a lot of experiences that I want to share with you that happened as I got older and older and still continue to happen to this day. And I feel like the older that I get, the more extreme the experiences get, the more I'm able to handle things better, the more crazier the experiences get. This might have been able to be chalked up to mere coincidence, but there are many other things that has happened since then that you just can't call coincidences. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed my content, I would love to have you join my team, and I really hope that you come back in the future. Bye-bye.